Change is quick. Overcoming the resistance to change is what takes a while. That's sort of the difference. And so if I understand what is causing resistance and I solve that, the change is pretty simple. A lot of times when you experience something new and so unique and so profound, you'd never go back another way. I'll give you an example. How far are we from the airport?
15 minutes.
15 minutes. Can you do it in 10?
Not without dying.
Can you do it in 5?
No.
Why? Why can't you do it in 2 minutes? Laws of physics.
Yeah.
Just the laws of physics. So now, the laws of physics are what we call a paradigm. It's a way that we understand the world. It's a narrative. This is what we understand to be true. That's why I call it a law. And so then when understanding these fundamental truths, we live a life within them and they become, in essence, a restriction or a boundary by which we operate, which are really needed. Now, if I were to then say, okay, follow me to your backyard. There's this bush. I move it to the side. I break this twig and a portal opens up and you get in, you're in the airport in 30 seconds. Now, one, you'd believe me because you experienced it. But here's the best part. If that were really true, would I ever have to remind you again to take that route? You wouldn't need a memo because you experienced something so profound, and they call it the point of no return. That's the difference between motivation and learning. And so if you know there's a better way and there's no risk to it, why not do it? And so when you think about the change process of changing habits, part of it is understanding to get people to that place of no return where they go, I see why.
Welcome back to another episode of the 1% Podcast. I'm your host, Vin End.
And I'm Shane.
And today we are joined by my man, Rene. Rene, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Guys, we are in for a treat. Now, we are going to talk so much today about the power of influence, how to rewire and rewrite the narratives in your brain. We're going to get into the deeper nuances of your story, pulling lessons from it, and how you can start taking everything in life that happens to you and seeing it as an opportunity so that you can live in the best, most fulfilling way, because Rene is that guy. He is the mastermind behind behavioral neuroscience, and he will take you from your least empowered, helpless self to the greatest version you never knew. This is an episode you guys are not going to want to miss. Let's get into it. All right, Rene, you are one of the leading authors, storytellers, and speakers on this planet. Can you give the audience a little bit more about who you are, what you do, how you do it, and the neuroscience behind it? Because that to me is one of the most fascinating things about what you do.
Sure. Well, for one, thanks for having me on the show. My background is in behavioral neuroscience, but so for the last 30 years, I've been obsessed probably in understanding not just the science of it, but moreover the application of it in leadership, sales, influence, change. What I truly believe is the central core skill sets to make you a better human and more effective to be able to perform better, to communicate better, sell more, lead better, et cetera. And so we've put about 250,000 people through our programs. And so everything is tested over time, science-based. I speak somewhere 250 times a year. So the things that I'm talking about aren't theoretical. I'm doing them on a daily basis. And I also help a lot of clients on privately. So a lot of the work that isn't in the social media domain.
I love it. So what initially sparked your interest in that? Like, why did you take neuroscience and dive super deep on it? Were you always just super interested in it, or what was the desire?
No, it was actually a question my mother asked me. She had me look around a room and said, what does everybody here have in common? And I was trying to figure it out. I couldn't figure it out. And she said, everybody has a brain. And if I can understand how the brain works, life just becomes easier. Communication becomes easier. Selling becomes easier. Leadership becomes easier. Relationships become easier. And when you start getting into neuroscience, you realize that psychology in a lot of ways failed us. Not intentionally, by the way. And this is kind of a big thing. It was really focused on what was broken about us. There's, whether it's depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, all of the deficiencies and where something's broken. Because when something breaks in the brain, it's the best indicator of understanding how that part of the brain works. So we had to back into it somehow, but not enough was being done on potential, on what we could do. How could we shift things to get a 10x result on something? How can we improve memory? How could we improve the speed of trust? How can we get people to reduce resistance in a faster way? And so my focus was on what can I do with this information, understanding schizophrenia or some sort of psychosis was interesting, but it wasn't my passion. It wasn't what I was fascinated in. I wanted to know What are we capable of?
So I presume this is primarily focused towards entrepreneurs. Are you reprogramming the brain to just get back to the basics? Because I feel like with technology in the era that we're at, it's pretty much this all day, or hey, ChatGPT, solve this issue. So how do you focus back to the basics where you can lead better, sell better, just be a better human being with technology overtaking everything and making life simpler?
Yeah, that's a great question. So is it reprogramming? I I'm very cautious in saying things like that because, the brain is pretty complex and it's constantly being programmed. It's constantly being wired. But then over time, we develop wires and wiring that we get very comfortable in. And so that might be the reprogramming piece, is developing new habits. That's why it's hard to learn a new habit, because we have neural pathways that are already set on old ones. And neurons are pretty lazy, so they follow the path of least resistance. And so when it's following that path of least resistance, getting it to do something new requires effort, it requires diligence, it requires energy, and overcoming fear and discomfort. I mean, there's so many things that are cliche, but you're creating new pathways, and those pathways take a while to form. And so, when you're talking about reprogramming, a lot of times reprogramming is re-narrating. Just what narrative, what story are we putting around this? Because the story is what creates the picture. And to create a picture, there's neural pathways that are being done, but the story is what's the trigger of the understanding of reality. And so if I can shift the story, the narrative, I'm shifting everything that's following and surrounding that as well. And so there's lots of different ways to think about reprogramming in terms of how we look at things. And so for me, at the end of the day, it's how do we perceive what's happening to us? And if you understand perception and how perception does create in essence, our social reality or understanding of reality, then I can say, okay, so then what's the precursor to that? It's story. What narrative am I telling myself? And what narrative am I telling other people? It seems like such a soft skill, but it's why politicians, marketing companies, the media, branding agencies, all of it, they race to understand and be the source of the narrative, because they understand that everything follows from there.
I'm curious.
Yeah, go ahead,
Out of
Shane.
these, it's a good follow up here. So out of the 250,000 people that have tried this training, seminar, test, whatever this may be, the American way is, how quickly can I get things done? And I know that's not going to be the case here. And I know everybody's different, but developing new habits, especially for, that old saying, can't teach old dogs new tricks, is very tough for people who are not open-minded. How quickly do you see an actual turnaround if they're devoted in changing their mindset?
Change is quick. Overcoming the resistance to change is what takes a while. And so that's sort of the difference. And so if I understand what is causing resistance and I solve that, the change is pretty simple. And, a lot of times when you experience something new and so unique and so profound, you'd never go back another way. And, it's like, I'll give you an example. How far away are you from your house right now?
I'm in my house.
Yeah, we're both.
Okay, so let's say to the grocery store.
Yep.
Oh, let's just go to the airport. How far are we from the airport?
30 minutes.
Miles.
30 miles. So how long does it take for you to get there?
15 minutes.
Damn.
50 minutes, 50? All right, what if I could can you do it in 15 minutes? Can you do it in 10?
Yeah.
Can you do it in 10?
No.
Can you do it in 5?
No.
Why?
Not without dying.
Well, but why can't you do it can you do it in 2? Why can't you do it in 2 minutes?
It's
laws of physics.
Yeah.
It's just the blatant laws of physics. So now the laws of physics are what we call a paradigm. It's a way that we understand the world. It's a narrative. This is what we understand to be true. That's why I call it a law. And so then when we understand these fundamental truths, we live a life within them, and they become, in essence, a restriction or a boundary by which we operate, which are really needed. Now, if I were to then say, okay, follow me to your backyard. There's this bush. I move it to the side. I break this twig, and a portal opens up. And you get in. You're in the airport in 30 seconds. Now, one, you'd believe me because you experienced it. But here's the best part. I know this is a stupid example in terms of fictitious, but if that were really true, would I ever have to remind you again to take that route? You wouldn't need a memo, because you experienced something so profound, and they call it the point of no return. That's the difference between motivation and learning. And so if you know there's a better way and there's no risk to it, why not do it. And so when you think about the change process of changing habits, part of it is understanding to get people to that place of no return where they go, I see why. Now, here's the hard part. A lot of times, in most cases, we have our biology working against us, the process of homeostasis. And homeostasis likes to keep things simple. Even if it's predictable, but it's uncomfortable, at least I understand this discomfort. Now, there might be a much better opportunity out there, something better. By the way, we all live this. Just because I talk about it doesn't make me immune to this process. That I might prefer, the brain would prefer the known discomfort to the possibility of freedom from that. But it's unknown because the fear is high, which means the cortisol is high, the stress is high, and the brain is designed to avoid that stress in the short term. And so, I mean, there's so many factors that play into it. And this is the importance of leadership and storytelling and influence, because the leader can create an experience. And when the story is being told, the listener doesn't know the difference between their own story and the story of the speaker. And so, like when we watch a movie, we don't know that our brain doesn't know the difference between our reality and the movie. And people are like, what do you mean? I said, well, have you guys ever cried during a movie? We all have done it. Well, here's the thing. Those are actors. It's not even real. And yet we're feeling this emotion as if it were real. So the brain, separated from yourself, really does experience that as reality. And so if we become good storytellers, we become the sources of how people understand the world and reality. It's a very, very powerful position to be in, which of course has been abused many, many times.
So let me ask you this. I'm a big fan of retelling people's stories. Now, do you believe, based on the way you just described things, do you believe that everybody can be changed? Like I've heard Tony Robbins, for instance, say, I could help change anybody. And I myself used to believe that, but I've also come up against people that refuse to change. Do you think that if you just leverage it hard enough, you could find their trigger? Or do you think that people have to be in the right space ready for change?
Well, obviously, if somebody doesn't want to change, they're not going to change. Now, you can create leverage, force them. Some people that don't want to change go through a heart attack and realize they have to. But at that point, it's still a choice. But it took a lot of pain for them to get there. And so you can break it down that fundamentally. Now, if I choose the approach of I will work with only those who want to change, I don't think there's much skill in that. Because it's like the people that I need to change are the ones that don't realize they have to. So like going to social media and posting about, your political party and making fun of the other side, there's no leadership in that, because all you're going to do is attract people who already believe what you believe, so no change, and push away those that you actually want to influence. You've done nothing. You've done absolutely nothing. There's no skill in that. But now, if you can spark an idea in the mind of the opposition and get them to say, man, I never thought about it that way. That's a skill. And so for me, I focus on, yes, of course people want to, but how good of a leader can I be? And what do I have to do to be the kind of leader that people will want to shift, and that I can tell a story that is so safe to listen to that they go, man, the way you explained it is different. And if I can spark that idea in the mind of somebody who has zero interest in change, that is the ultimate skill.
Can I ask a question based on what it is? You sound like my amazing preacher every single Sunday. One, are you a God-fearing man? And two, why? Why do you do this? Why? What is your why?
Do I believe in God and spirituality and the teachings of Jesus and all that stuff? I think they're beautiful. Yes. Do I believe in something bigger than me? Absolutely. I always wonder, what do you mean by God-fearing? Meaning, do I worry, am I going to be judged? Probably, yeah. But I think if I worry about being judged, am I doing things for the right reason? I want to function not out of fear. So to me, I want to function out of the gifts that God has given me. I want to function to the fullest extent, knowing that I'm human, that I'm going to make mistakes, and Lord knows I've made so many. And does it scare me? Yes. But it's more over the hidden intention that scares me. I can play roles, I can show up, I can do rites and rituals, but is my soul in a good place? My heart in a good place? Because that is where I think speaks directly. You can't dupe that system, I don't think. And so for me, yes, I do 100% believe. Why? That's a deep question. One that I've been pretty clear on for a lot of years, and yet keeps evolving and I wouldn't say it evolves. It shows up for me in different ways. It gets challenged in different ways. I believe in several different stories that to me, heard this comic, Natasha, what is her name? I forget her name. She's freaking hilarious. She goes, you know what? Us Gen Xers, we used to do something crazy. It's like, I don't even know why I'm talking about this right now. It's kind of weird, a little strange, but we used to do this crazy thing called critical thinking, where you take into consideration both sides and then you come up with your own ideas.
Crazy.
And so, yeah, what a thought, right? And for me, there are so many truths, and I don't have it well, maybe I do have it in front of me. There's so many truths out there in terms of what I think is right, what I think is wrong, what people think is right, what people think is wrong. And I'm pulling this out of my bag here because I brought it to an event that I was challenged on this about. So I'm going to try to find it here because I think it's pertinent to what we're talking about. There's a book that I have called Oneness, and this book takes a lot of the major teachings of the Bible, thou shalt not kill, or to the golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated. And it finds the exact same text in all of the other biblical texts, from the Torah, the Quran, to the Tao, you name it. And what it shows is there's a centralized truth to all major religions. And, the reality too is there's been a lot of men between when it came out to now, a lot of humans involvement. And if you ever play the telephone game, like, messages tend to change. So we have to critically think to find out where's the truth in that. And a lot of the Bible was written in parable and in story, especially Jesus. He spoke in parable. In the literal interpretation of him can be a scary one, but the symbolic one can be really beautiful. And so then there comes the contextual analysis of what's happening and what's going on. But my religion's pretty simple: treat people well, do good things, utilize your gifts, make this world a better place. And then the how in which we do that is really at the core. And so, to me, the story of the talents is one of the stories that showed up in all four Gospels. These are written hundreds of years apart. God comes down, gives one person 5 talents, 3 talents, and 1. Go on and do something good with these things. Well, he comes back later. The person he gave 5, what'd you do? Turn him into 10. Awesome. High five. Good work. 3, what'd you do? Turn him into 6. Love it. 1, what did you do? Nothing. I buried it. And from what I understand, God lost his cool. One of the most upset times he was. I gave you a gift and you did nothing with it. Now, if that shows up 4 times, that to me screams that there's something to that gift idea. And the gift means, what is my talent? What am I good at? And so I have to pay attention to what I'm good at, not what I love, not what I'm passionate about. What am I good at? And that's different, because sometimes we're good at things that we're not real passionate about. And I think that there might be something on the end of that if we stay in there, right? Too many people fall to the passions. I'm passionate about food, but that's also why I was 300 and some pounds. It's like, doing what makes you immediately happy is not the way. And so we go, okay, now, story of creation. The world was created. It was a 6 days work, 1 day rest ratio. It wasn't 5 days work, 2 days rest. Okay, so there's something about hard work. One of the words that shows up most in the Bible is the word toil, sweat of the brow. So work is critical. And there's a difference between a job, a career, and a vocation. Or a vocation, there's a calling. And I believe that calling is to utilize the gifts that we have and to work really hard and to suffer over that. Now, we go back to the original definition of suffering. It comes from the word passion. Passion is to suffer. That was in the 13th century, part of the 13th century. It was the passion of Christ. It was given to somebody who was passionate. They died, they suffered over something they believed in. 16th century, it changed over to, passionate pursuits and a sexual connotation to it. But it was around to suffer, and compassion is to suffer with. So if there's a suffering and hard work component to the utilization of your gifts, and at the end of each day in the story of creation, God said, was it good? Did I do good? Which is the epitome of contemplation, which would be the highest form of leisure on prayer. So they say that one of the best forms of prayer is contemplation. The unexamined life is not worth living, because in contemplation is the only time you can actually see if you were a good person or not. And if you weren't, you can make a change. And if you were, you can continue. So contemplation was important. And the final piece of that was a study that I saw from Hiram Smith, who was a partner of Stephen Covey at the time. He talked about this study that did 2,700 near-death experiences, and they all reported the same thing: the light at the end of the tunnel, being approached by relatives. But then they also reported 2 questions that were asked, and those 2 questions have always followed me because there isn't a single part of my life that I can't answer with those two questions. The first one is, did you gain knowledge? Good or bad, no matter what's happened to me in my life, man, did I gain knowledge? There's always an opportunity to gain knowledge. And then the last part was, did you expand your capacity to love? It wasn't, did you love people? No, the capacity. You expand the capacity. I can love this much, but how can I love more? It's the weight room. Like, how much can I bench? Well, no, 200. Okay. Well, can I do 225? Can I do 300? Can I do more? All of those things. And so there's this growth of the capacity to love. And to me, growing the capacity to love, the weight room of that is grace, the unmerited favor, undeserving love, undeserving forgiveness of God. And since, depends on what you believe. I believe that we're all children of God. Some people say that's a big lie. I don't know, but I think in some ways, and even symbolically, we are. And so we're the only eyes, ears, and hands that he has to love one another, to heal. So my purpose is to utilize the gifts that God has given me to gain knowledge and expand my capacity to love and further in his creation. And so that, if I'm a janitor, if I'm a painter, if I'm an artist, a musician, if I'm an executive, it kind of fits for me. So yeah. Long answer. Sorry.
No, great answer.
I'm coming over for Sunday dinner. I really am really curious on how long it took you to develop that why. And thank you for, your interpretation and what you believe in and sharing that with us. And I wrote down a lot too. I'm excited. My son's name is Hiram too, for different reasons as well. But there's another book that also gives those types of examples of those near-death experiences. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to look into that.
I'd love to see that. How long did it take? I put that together in my early 20s, probably between the ages of 19 and 22 was when that all started coming together for me. What does it say?
To Heaven and Back, 7 Lessons from Heaven.
Very cool.
Okay. So I want to get back to this. What is your genius talent? Is it how to be a good storyteller? I understand your why, but your genius talent, and what are you giving? How are you helping other people to witness their talent here to their benefit? If that is what
what is my genius talent? I don't know if I ever put that together. Can you define what you mean by genius talent?
I've actually spent 3 hours on talking about my genius talent and doing a deep dive into myself and figuring out what my genius talent is. I can actually read that genius talent, but this may be a question that we save for another podcast. So let me rephrase here, because I think this is just going to go down into, a rabbit hole we don't need to. Okay, Rene, you're here for promote. Let me shift back here. I want to talk either about shifting into, who your demographic is and who you want to sell to, especially after that. And the overview is good. Are you fine with that shift?
Yeah. Is this on record or off record?
Off record.
Yeah. I asked I asked Claude what my genius talent is, and I don't mind answering that question. So, but it's up to you. You shift it however you want.
Okay. Let's talk about the genius talent. All right. So, Rene, my genius talent is turning endless possibilities into realities. I do this by researching as needed to conclude a clear yes or a hell no, by ensuring appropriate capabilities and passions, and then accessing, delegating, and optimize both people and processes. What do you believe your genius talent is?
Well, as I wrote this, and I just asked Claude, because I've done so much work with Claude.
Love Claude.
And it just erased it, by the way. It showed it to me, erased it. And one of the things that came up was sparking an idea in a mind of opposition as one of the quotes. And so that was interesting. But it's actually, I did some work on this recently, and I think it's this. And it's helping you become impossible to misunderstand and to be ignored. And make it impossible for you to be misunderstood or ignored.
I feel like that's very memorable. I don't have too many follow-ups besides how much time do you have here? But I think just looking at your resume and looking at your teachings and looking at what you do, I feel like that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it fit. It was an exercise that we were doing on with a good buddy of mine who's launched some huge brands, and we were kind of re-looking at my ethos and what I do. And AI came back and said that Rene makes it impossible for you to be misunderstood. And I'm like, oh,
Wow.
that's what I've been trying to say. And storytelling, to body language, to sequencing, to timing, to loving, to listening, to structuring, to using, I mean, at the end of the day, if I can remove the misunderstandings between people and I can take good ideas and make it impossible for you to ignore a good idea, I think I'll be good with my life.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've done, surprisingly to say this, but I've done quite a bit of marriage counseling in my life as a therapist. And there are two big things. To your point, Rene, I started moving away from therapy because I realized that therapy was getting it wrong. It mainstreamed the wrong therapists. There's so many other better people that they don't spotlight enough. And funny
Yeah.
enough, the way that marriage counseling used to work is you would go in, you would sit there, and it would always be focused on what's wrong, who's doing what wrong in the marriage. It wasn't until newer research, which is seemingly very obvious for guys like us, that the best marriages were the ones that focused on solutions and what they could do differently within the marriage as opposed to what the other people could do. And so it's really interesting because what I've seen time and time again is most, if not all, conflicts are because of misunderstandings. Would you agree
Yeah.
with that more or less?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. There's a lot of research coming out and a lot of rhetoric around how current therapy methods are not healthy because they cause rumination.
Yep.
And one of the worst things you can do for your own personal is just to ruminate and replay a story over and over and over again. Now, we do need to process emotion. It's got to flow. The emotion has to flow through you. We know that for sure. I always tell people the example is like emotions are like beach balls. Try to hold them underwater, see what happens. How much energy it takes, how much attention it takes away from you versus just letting it go. Now, how you let it go matters too. You can't just like vomit it all over people. But that, if you're in a real time person, real time, things. I'm going through stuff in my life where I was telling somebody, I'm like, and they're trying to talk me out of it. And I'm like, no, I got to just feel this. It's okay. It sucks, but I got to just feel it.
Yep.
And when you do, it flows through you at least, but you have to have the discipline to not stay in there because sometimes we ruminate. And so for me, this is what it only works for me, is to let myself feel it, let it flow through me, and then to create the narrative for myself afterwards that's going to help everyone. And that narrative usually includes two sides in some way, shape, or form, hopefully some level of grace. That doesn't mean it's perfect, but sometimes I have the wrong narrative and then I got to go back and re-narrate it. And so then I can create something that moves me through it because holding on to it is not good. Ruminating on it is not good. But when you look at the purpose of memory, what helped me really understand this was the purpose of memory is to draw a lesson and meaning from a past event to better prepare you for the future. So if you've got a recurring memory, something that haunts you is because you haven't created meaning for it. And if you can go back and create meaning, well, how do I create meaning over tragedy? Welcome to amor fati, which is the love of your fate, the acceptance of life as it is, not as you wish it would have been. To even be able to fall in love with the tragedies of your life because you can't change it, but you can re-narrate it. It's not easy, but that's the purpose it serves.
I like that you brought out some Stoic teachings. The obstacle is the way. One of the most formidable terminologies I've ever heard, and most people are too uncomfortable to face. Do you think, I'm actually a big fan of Stoicism. I study it. I've gone very heavily down the philosophical route. I believe that Stoicism should actually be foundational, more so than psychology. What's your thought on that?
Well, if you go to a liberal arts school, it is philosophy. Philosophy was foundational. It was a requirement. And so was, in my school, so was theology. And you combine philosophy and theology and science and business. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Like Pope John Paul was a prolific business writer. Prolific. And you read his thing on ethics and dilemma and the challenges of it, and you go into maximization of shareholder wealth versus maximization of stakeholder wealth, you're forced to ask difficult questions, which is what I think the brain needs more than anything. You got to go through ethical dilemmas to see who you are, where you are, and you understand that life isn't always that simple.
What are you currently focusing on? What's the next 5 years look for you?
Number one is my health.
Can you elaborate, by the way? I feel like a lot of people talk about health, but why is the health is so important? There's obvious answers, but I'd love to hear your interpretation of why.
Yeah, there's obviously I'll just show you a visual, which hopefully you can put on here. But I was 308 pounds at 45% body fat, and people don't believe me until I show them. And you kind of see. It'll come here in a second. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Everyone believes it. Like, it wasn't that bad. Oh man, it was bad. And that was, so when we look at, like, even just look at this photo here. There we go. Just two different people walking in the room. Right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna, how many 85-year-old 300-pound men do you know?
Don't exist.
None. They don't exist. So I'm choosing to not exist at a certain age. That was a reality for me. And so I also thought to myself, I'm like, man, would I listen to me anymore? I had the same content, the same philosophical thoughts, the same depth, same experience, but so I could get by, I got to pass. But I wasn't okay with that anymore. I wasn't reaching my potential, and it just wasn't healthy. And I also know I'm just, I'm approaching 50. I'm 49 years old. Shit. Okay. This better become real soon here. And so health for sure. And the next piece too is really understanding the business side and the scalability side beyond speaking and training, because it creates a nice lifestyle, but it's not a real business. Like if I have to show up to work every day, I can't go on vacation and make money. Well, that's not a real business. It's a freelance job. Now, it could be a real sexy one. It can create a nice lifestyle and make a lot of cash and money, but there's no sellable asset. You were talking about, getting a SaaS platform. That's a business that you can sell. I got nothing to sell. And if I lose my voice, what do I got? So those are the pieces that are really on my mind in terms of that. I've always been very driven from a altruistic perspective. So that still maintains in terms of what I want to do in the world. But I also have to think from a business perspective. And so that's a lot of good changes are happening, and having fun there.
I feel that same way, man.
I heard two questions.
I would say, is there any nuggets that you can give us on this transition or this business that you're building, or anything you can tell us what's in the works?
Well, I think it's more over, I have skill sets. It's like Liam and Nielsen. I've got skills. I have very unique skill sets, and I was always told, do something nobody else can do, and I did, and I'm like, shit, I'm the only one who can do it. Not good. It creates job security, I guess, but that's not the goal. And so for me, really learning to have good skill sets, but then realizing, how do I empower other people along the way in that certain skill set so that they can do it as well? And so that's the part where I'm really starting to realize. And there's other business ideas and things that, don't really require my face or my brand, but something that I can help facilitate. And so those things are really exciting to me.
That is the same realization that I came to a few months back. And it's funny because it's something that's echoed. I woke up with a sore throat on Friday, had to cancel all my clients, and I was like, well, shit, there goes the whole day. And so it's a very interesting thing when you think about, how do you scale a personal brand? I think a lot of people want a personal brand, and it's becoming more and more popular nowadays, but people don't realize that what we're doing by building our personal brands, it's like, yes, we are doing something unique and exciting, but now we're also giving ourselves those golden handcuffs if we're stuck in it. So I love that you're starting to make that transition. I got a question for you on that too, is like, our audience is mostly people that are in entrepreneurship, or maybe they're business owners like us, right? We're not really entrepreneurs if we can't step out of it. But as you started to transition as this kind of thinking, what would you tell to a leader? So let's say we got a great entrepreneur here, or a guy who's working into entrepreneurship. How would you start helping him and directing him into being able to expand his influence, his impact, and hopefully start building out his ability to step out of his business a little bit?
Well, I'm very big on staying in my lane.
Mm,
And so I will not advise on how to get out of what I've done until I've actually gotten out of it.
sure.
That'd be like me teaching somebody about the menstrual cycle and or how to grow rich and thick hair. I'm just, it's not my lane. And so I think that's that's one of what I'd say my proudest skill sets is to recognize when I'm out of my lane. There are a lot of people better at that than I. Shane seems to have grown a very good business. He's got different scaling problems, but he's definitely scaled, right? And so I'd probably take his advice over scaling over mine. And there's really, really good people out there. But I would say how to avoid getting into what I did is be careful on a business that requires a face. I watch people with scalable businesses say, I want to get into coaching. I'm like, why? I want to get into speaking. I'm like, why? Like, I get the feeling, but don't build a business around it. I know people that speak for free but make millions. I know people that charge ungodly amounts of money and make a few $100,000. Well, because they have a business. The speaking can funnel attention. Should you learn how to speak? 100%. Should you do all that stuff? But have a business behind you and something that works. And don't learn that from me. That would be my first advice. But I can teach you how to sell what you have. I can teach you how to communicate. I can teach you how to create an incredible brand. The branding piece is important. I do think personal brand and leadership brands are critical in today's world. Because even if you work for another company, you have a leadership brand, which really says what kind of leadership is expected of you the moment you walk in a room. Some people, the moment they walk in a room, people sharpen their pencils because they know they're going to be asked numbers. Some people panic when somebody walks in the room because they know that person is going to remember the last promise that you made them, and they're going to hold you to it. Some people walk in a room and they go, here's somebody who's going to talk a lot, make a lot of promises, and not do anything. That's a brand. What's expected of you before you walk in a room? And that to me is critical no matter what it is that you do. And a personal brand for me too, in terms of what you're doing, is what do you believe in the world? Because man, there's so many options. Why am I choosing you? Price is not an advantage, but a piece of chicken with no story ends up on a $1 menu at KFC, but a piece of chicken with a story, I'll pay $100, $200, eat it off tasting menu. Still just chicken. I'm paying for the experience and something broader. And that's an illogical decision. Because if we were fully logical, we would be looking at the most logical way to get nutrients into our bodies at the cheapest rate. But no, we want coffee at $8 where we can buy it for 25 cents a pound somewhere else. We're going to get a cup for $8 every day. It's a car payment. It's illogical, but that's what story does.
I don't know why. I think I'm missing something here, and I maybe the audience, will kind of ask the same question, but I feel it's very important. You guys being in this lane as speakers and coaches, and I know people who have built construction companies, restaurants, who are now transitioning into public speaking, into coaching because of the work. Why do you want to build a business? Do you feel like you're going to have more purpose? Is it entitlement? Is it, I just don't, help me understand why.
Why do I want to?
Please.
So that I can breathe at night knowing financially we'll be okay.
We want our time back.
What's that?
We want our time back.
Time. It really is about time freedom. And, I breathe just fine, but I also I'm used to the train I got to run in front of. And so that's not long-term good. I want to be able to go enjoy certain things. And I do, like I said, it's a great lifestyle.
It's interesting,
but it comes with certain things. Right. And so to me, and I think you can do both, by the way, I know you can do both. It's just moreover, and by the way, I don't think I'm serving as many people as I can by running a non-scalable business. I'm not giving anybody the same pleasure that I'm getting. I'm not giving opportunities out to people. I'm not hiring massive amounts of people. So there's a lot of really good things that we could do. And what if I could get it to more people, these skill sets that truly liberate them? So it's also an obligation to be able to do that.
It's just so crazy to hear that out loud because I've never heard it before. When you think of my line of work, right? You think of this is great. You're able to scale it. Normal people think of exiting this business. And then what is your next steps? And then with people that don't know their next steps or working through that, you think of, well, let me just coach or let me just speak and tell everybody what I did and how I was able to exit for, 8, 9 figures or whatever the case may be. And now it's like hearing from somebody who's been doing this for so long. He's like, I don't want to be doing this anymore. I don't want to be not in that case. I want to add more purpose, more value, be less invasive, not having to just be relying on me the whole time and just let it sit back and breathe. Which
I think it's not that I don't want to do it. I'm really grateful. And I want to have the impact, but the business model isn't right. And that's so, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's just, this is a business model opportunity and a business model challenge. And that in and of itself is an opportunity to grow. I mean, and I think it's, because I run a pretty good business. I mean, I do have, in essence, a recurring model that things come in. It might not be traditional. I can't sell it, but there's a better way. And I think it's also part of in my nature to say, can I be better at this? And can I do this better? If the answer is yes, then I have an obligation to find it.
I took that out of context. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no, not a problem. But it's a really good question. These are really good questions because they force me to think too.
I got a few ideas that I'll share with you off the podcast because I've been thinking a lot about this too. So maybe you'll like some of the thoughts that I've come up with, or who knows, maybe I've already had them. But I'd love to. We'll follow up after this. So let me ask you this. I got to ask because this is all about you, and we want this episode to be all about you because you're a phenomenal guy, Rene. Very few people like you. So let me ask you this: with Amplify, with your events, how do you currently create impact? Let the audience know what they could expect as they look deeper into the way that you're showing up and how you are currently impacting the world.
So what does Amplify do?
Mm-hmm.
Amplify dispels the myth that speaking is a natural skill, that influence is natural, and it shows you that it's a science and that it's right in front of you for the taking. It shows you that influence is so much more than sales and marketing. It's about the impact you make on the world, because if you don't have influence, I mean, you walk in a room, no one notices, you tell a joke, no one laughs, you sell products and no one buys, you cast visions and no one follows. That's a feeling of feeling invisible and insignificant. Mm. One of the worst of human experiences is to have no impact and no influence. But now bring it back. You walk in a room, people notice, you sell the product, people buy, you share ideas, people love it, you cast visions and everyone follows. Now you feel significant. Mm. And what's crazy is if you were in a meeting and you felt insignificant, you'd wonder, why am I in this meeting? If you were in a relationship feeling insignificant, you'd say, why am I in this relationship? And so when you don't have influence, the next question is what's my purpose then? And that's when it clicked that the fastest way to purpose is through influence. And maybe it's even backwards. What's my purpose? Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe where's my biggest influence? Where do I have the most influence? Mm. And magically, that might be the purpose. That might be the gift that's hidden to you. It might be with kids. It might be with adults. My mother was a nun, worked in migrant labor camps in, war-torn communities. And for some reason, executives started listening to her. And I remember as a kid saying, why don't you work with the communities? It's like you sold out on them. And she said, Rene, because for some crazy reason, these powerful men listen to me. And I feel like that's what I got to do. Mm-hmm. So sometimes your power is thrust upon you. You're called to it, even if you didn't want it. But we got to sometimes listen to that. Mm. So I think that's when we talk about influence and realizing that so much more is available to you. You don't have to change jobs always to find that influence. You don't have to change relationships. But when you understand that there's a process, now all of a sudden, impact becomes a lot more attainable.
One of the greatest things, I've met you a few times at a few different events. And at the last event we were at together was our friend Amberly. Shout out to her. She was on the podcast too. And you were at that event. You were one of the speakers. And I remember you took this woman who was extremely meek and She was so frightened, and she looked like this frail little thing, and you were scared to see her up on that stage. And by the end of, I don't even know how long that exercise was. I think you had her up there for 10 minutes, maybe 15.
Oh,
By the end of
10,
that,
8 to 10 minutes.
yeah, by the end of it, she wouldn't shut up. You couldn't get her to stop talking. And
Yeah.
how long did it take you to learn how to show people in such a quick period of time in front of an audience, right? How many people were at that event? 100, maybe a little more, give or take?
Yeah. Yeah. A couple hundred maybe.
Right? She never spoke before. That was her first time. She was petrified of it. In front of 100 people, you got her to speak and not stop talking. What kind of laser focus mastery, or how long did it take you to discover you could use your skill to help people do just that in real time?
It's an interesting question. I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. One is never losing sight of me feeling the same way that they felt. I have felt that way for the majority of my life. And so there's an empathy that goes with that. But then there's also the awakening of going, this isn't some magic God-given talent. This is a method and a process. And then just observing. You watch people under certain environments crumble, but you change the environment, that same person shines. So I go, okay, so the environment has a lot to do with it. And so then so the environment changes. The person is still the same person. Why does the person change with the environment? I was helping this kid. He was petrified talking to women and asking him out. And, but you watch him at happy hour talking to his buddies, he's fine. Then a woman comes along and he crumbles. And he couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, you know what? Hold on a second. Give me a second. I got to run to the bathroom. Can you see if my car is okay being double parked out there? Can you ask her, please? I go to the bathroom and I come back and I go, what'd she say? She goes, oh, you're fine. I'm like, were you nervous talking to her? He goes, no. He goes, why? I go, well, she's an attractive woman. Why? You weren't nervous at all? He goes, no. I said, so why are you not nervous there, but you were nervous if you were trying to ask them out?
Right.
And so it's possible. And I said, it's one thing is you had a hidden agenda before. You had no agenda with her. You genuinely took in a conversation with a genuine question. She felt the genuineness of the thing and had a normal interaction. But a lot of times the nice guys, quote unquote nice guys, they finish last because they're passive, manipulative liars. I'm going to be nice to you in hopes that you will. It's a quid pro quo. I'll be nice if you do this. Well, women have had that their whole life. They see right through it. At least the douchebag is honest about what he wants. And then they can enter cautiously, but they know I know it's what I'm in for. And then they might see through something. They might realize he was joking or whatever it is, but they see somebody that can stand on their own 2 feet. And so, when you realize that you shift the environment, you shift the narrative, all of a sudden the person comes out. And so if I could ask you a question and I can have you recall a memory versus trying to memorize a story or memorize a script, it's a totally different experience because the memories are memorized. So my job was how do I help them uncover a memory that was very critical to them? And, recently I'd heard this because I've known this, but it was a really great articulation from Donald Miller. And because we study heroes and villains all the time. Every major movie has heroes and they have villains. And what's crazy, you learn that heroes and villains have the exact same backstory. Orphaned in some way, wronged in some way, the world hurt them. And even in movies, you'll see in screenplays, and this is directly from Donald Miller, he said the screenwriters will put a scar, a nick, a tick, a limp, something to show this person had a rough upbringing. But then you go, okay, they had the exact same upbringing and the same backstory. Why did one become a hero, one become a villain? And it because of the moment of how they decide to deal with difficulty and adversity. The villain says, the world hurt me, therefore I'm going to hurt the world. The hero says, the world hurt me, I'm going to make sure no one feels the way that I feel. And so that choice, through every adversity, I've been telling people, I said, you can be a hero or a villain. What do you want to be? This happened to you. Good, it happened to that person too. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to hurt the world and become a villain? Or are you going to make sure that never happens to anybody to be the hero? Lighthouse or foghorn? It's the same concept. Lighthouses shine the way. Foghorns are the warning who we don't want to be. So I think it's just going through all of that, and being able to see it pattern and pattern after time after time after time, it makes a difference.
Mm.
Just want to add a little humor. Love Guru, Rene Love Guru should be the, if you're looking for a new job, man. I feel like that was really well said and put.
Stitched, right? Or is there hitched? Was it hitched?
Yeah.
Hitch, yeah.
Yeah.
No, you'd be surprised how often that really good men ask me that question.
It's basic principles is what you're instilling, and it makes complete sense.
Yeah, and it's what's crazy is, and this sounds horrible, but society recently has been trying to overly feminize men, and I'm all for having feminine qualities. My name's Rene, and I have a lot of feminine personality traits, and which I thank God for, because we need a balance of both. And women need to be okay with some masculine personality traits. It bodes well in business. You'll make more money. You'll be better negotiators. You won't be so agreeable in the negotiation process, and that will make more money. But when we try to overly and get rid of the masculine energy, we just can't do that either. It's not good. It's not healthy. And here's the thing: fundamentally, women don't want that. At the end of the day, now what's happened is that maybe some people went hyper masculine and were abusive and things like that. But that's a small percentage.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very small percentage. And so, even therapy is known to be overly feminizing of men. And dig into Sadia psychology. She is amazing. She dives into this. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it's such a taboo subject, but I am so for feminine qualities and feminine personality traits in business for men, because we need it. And I'm also for keeping and holding on to the importance of the masculine energy that's needed, that balance. It is supposed to be balanced. It's supposed to play off of each other. It's supposed to keep everything checked. You can't go too far either direction. The yin and the yang balance each other, but they're yet found in each. That's why you have the opposing colors, but a dot of each opposing color in each opposing color, because they're still found in one another. And so it's such a beautiful symbol to be able to look at that.
I think it's generally hard for people to understand that message and not have walls up and not feel like they have to guard or be somebody different or be macho, machismo, yes, overly confident. I feel like it's very, very hard in today's society with all the dating apps and technology out there to be truly genuine, be truly yourself. My biggest thing that I wrote down, which I think, is my biggest takeaway here, is when you're dealing with anything, especially a tragedy, feel it, flow through you, move it through, and re-narrate it. I think it's multifaceted, but I think that is very powerful.
A lot to it, yeah. And I don't mean to simplify or diminish or dismiss the tragedies that even some of our listeners are feeling right now. It's my heart goes to you, and then you will reach a point at some point where you say, okay, how long do you want to quote unquote work on this, or do you want to decide your way through it and then find the story so you can move forward and heal someone else because of your tragedy? That's a beautiful thing. Someone's looking for that guidance.
So it's one of those things too that's so important to understand, because a lot of people don't. I've worked with the people that are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that have had pains from when they were 8, 10, 12, and they're still dealing with the same pain. They haven't changed as a person since that thing happened to them 40, 50, 60 years ago. And it's a shame. But, I think the people that really do make the most impact in this world, to your point, are the people that have been through their pain and then understand how they can shift the world. I mean, that's a big part of why I got into this, right? I dealt with so much stuff in my own life that eventually I said, well, if I was able to overcome it, I probably have an obligation to teach it, because I know so many people still suffer and struggle. And that's why I have to do this. It's not even something that I feel like I want to do. It's something I feel like I have to show up for this. If we really were able to look at life more through that lens, everybody, not just you, me, or Shane, all of us, I think the world would become such a better place, because everybody is able to now look at how they had a shortcoming, what they then did to enhance their life, and then how they're trying to pass it on. Do you think the world will ever really get there? Or do you think that maybe, and then maybe this is too far out of a question, but we could have a fun little speculative conversation here. Do you think with AI on the rise, people are going to start trying to understand each other more, because we're going to feel so much more disconnected that the only option to really get connected is to start creating more understanding?
I think I would shift the question.
Go
Would
for
the
it.
world be a better place if more people would be that way? Of course, but that's a let's sit back and hope philosophy for me. I go, what do I have to do to ensure the world around me sees multiple perspectives? What kind of leader do I need to become? Communicator, speaker, storyteller, so that if you're around me, you can't help but see other perspectives
Mm.
in a safe way. I can only impact the world around me.
Yep.
And you can scale that through social media and through marketing and TV and things like that. So if you're lucky enough to do that, it's great. But what's the world around me? What kind of leader do I need to become so that if you're around me, that I can your eyes will be open to new ideas.
Mm.
And then I can maybe make the world around me a better place. And then the bigger question is how do I do that on a mass scale? How do I open up the idea of perspectives and to other people? So I just might shift the question a little bit.
I like it. And I think that we're going to start doing a lot more of that once AI becomes bigger than it already is.
Oh yeah. So your question around AI, I have a lot of thoughts on AI. That when it first came out, I remember when it first, I was involved very, very early, and somebody was saying that, well, that's cheating. I said, hold on. How'd you get to work? I drove. Well, you weren't meant to drive. You were cheating. Okay. So now, typewriters, cheating. Not a pen, cheating. Like audiobooks, cheating. Is it? Or is it an advancement? Now, can you abuse of it? Of course. You can abuse of anything. You can abuse of alcohol. You can abuse water and kill yourself through too much hydration. T.S. Eliot had a great quote that just because something's been abused does not neglect its use. Now, what's interesting, there's checks and balances built into AI too. You use AI too much, the life will figure you out. But then, you use AI a lot, you'll just get smarter. And there's AI that will figure out who's using AI and not. But I tell you, you can write it. You can use AI to write a love letter, but you can't use it to read it to the person you love and make that eye contact. There's no way. There's so many things. And I wrote this commencement speech, and I'll see if I can find it here, for the University of Iowa. And I'll see if I can find it as we're going here. But it was, here I'm commencement. Here I'm speaking to a group of MBA students. And I remember I couldn't figure out, like, what do they want to hear from me, right? They'd read my book, which is cool. And but I'm like, what message that's not cliche am I going to give them? And I got there the night before, and I just kept asking what were the things that they were facing. And over and over and over again, what I got from the president to the dean was this group of people is graduating into a world that really didn't exist a year ago. This is a world that now all of a sudden they've been told their whole life to gather certificates and knowledge, and now in 2-hour period I can replicate their entire existence just using AI. That's a very different experience. Very different experience.
Yeah.
All right. So you had asked about AI, and I was talking about this commencement speech that I gave, and I'll just read you for the final 2 minutes of it, because I think it helped reset the tone over what it is. And I think, one, I'm a huge advocate of AI. I use it every day. Is it scary? Yes. Is it reality? Absolutely. But how does somebody navigate within it? And I think that's the question I wanted to be able to answer. And so what I wrote is, so this is sort of the final frame, the final message was to this audience. It was, so when you leave here today, you'll enter a world where people will try to convince you that what you know matters most. They'll pressure you to accumulate more credentials, certifications, even more technical skills. Don't fall for it. Your knowledge will become obsolete, but your humanity is what is timeless. This whole talk was around their humanity is becoming irreplaceably human. So your ability to listen deeply, to communicate clearly, to stand up for what's right, to lead with love instead of fear, these skills will never be automated. They will never be replicated by AI. And this is a thought that I had. I said, so, think about this. Let's replace the word intelligence with other things that we value. Who here wants artificial love, artificial empathy, artificial apologies, artificial passion, artificial courage, artificial hope, artificial friendship, artificial trust, artificial compassion, artificial forgiveness, artificial sacrifice, artificial inspiration, artificial faith, artificial loyalty, or even what we get a lot of right now is artificial wisdom. It doesn't sound so scary anymore when you look at it that way. So this is where I think you realize that your real superpower is in your humanity. And so be irreplaceably human, be courageously authentic, be the leader that this world so desperately needs, because the future isn't about humans versus machines. It's about humans with machines, guided by leaders who never forgot that behind every innovation, every decision, every strategy, there are human hearts that need to be touched, human spirits that need to be lifted, and human potential that needs to be unleashed. And so that is your calling. That's your responsibility. That is your opportunity to change the world. So go be irreplaceably human. So that is where we ended that talk.
Throw the hats up. If that's not one of the most memorable speeches, I love it. I love the view on it as well.
Thanks. Full 20 minutes. It's on my LinkedIn if you want to read the full thing. It's pretty cool.
I think we should all go check it out. So Rene, we are coming up close to the end here. So I guess we'll also leave that as one of the final thoughts of today's podcast, which has been really memorable for at least Shane and I, and I'm sure our audience. But please, can you tell the people a little bit more? How can they get in touch with you? How can they get involved in Amplify? What do you got for them? Tell them what to do from here, Rene.
Sure. Well, one, thank you for having me on. These were great questions. I appreciate going a different route with these. In terms of how to get a hold of me, go to Learn with Rene on Instagram and all socials. I think we're right now doing about 40 videos per day across all social platforms. It's about 1,200 a month. So there's a lot of things. None of them are selling anything. A lot of giveaways, from handbooks to playbooks to scriptings to all sorts of things. We do have Amplify if you want to take this very serious and come to my home for 2.5 days in a small group of 10 people, where we go to an intensive transformation around speaking. What you saw do with that young woman on stage is what we do for 2.5 days. And so it is life-changing. It's transformational. For those that can't do that, we have a 30-day influence mastery program where I created 30 videos, masterclass quality, and you do one micro change per day over 30 days, and you create a complete transformation that way. We have a free podcast. I've got a book, try to meet you where you're at. And if you can't afford something, send us a message. We'll probably do something for you anyways.
I love it. Well, there you have it, folks. If this isn't the man that makes it easy to access him, I don't know who is. Go get involved with Rene, his Amplify events. You're going to love him. You got to check him out. Whether you could do the 2-day immersion or just go and get involved in his podcast or his books, I think you totally should. He is one of the greatest humans I've ever met. Rene, thank you so much for being on the show. Stick around for a minute afterwards. I got something else to tell you. And guys, there you have it. Please like, follow, share, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you thought of today's episode. Join us for another one of the 1% podcast. I'm your host, Vin End.
And I'm Shane.
And that was Rene. See you, everybody.
Thank you so much.